Hello viewers, today we are going to discuss uh, one of the topic, program and achievements of the early nationalists or the moderates. So throughout this video we will use either early nationalist or moderate. So we will discuss in detail what methods did the moderates follow, what were their achievements, what were their failures, how much impact did they leave in the Congress. So we are going to discuss in detail about the programs and achievement of the early nationalists. As far as the history of Indian National Congress is concerned, we can divide it into three main phases, that is the moderate phase, that is from 1885 to 1905. So from the beginning of the Indian National Congress till 1905, this phase is considered as the moderate phase, while the assertive phase or the radical phase of the Indian National Congress start from 1905 to 1918, because you know that in 1905 the partition of Bengal took place, and after that the leaders of Indian National Congress, they followed some radical approach. And that is why this tenure, this phase from 1905 to 1918 is known as the assertive phase, while 1918 onwards Mahatma Gandhi, he became a prominent leader of Indian National Congress and he led the movement till independence. So from 1919 to 1947, this phase is called the Gandhian era. During this time, Gandhi, he led non-cooperation movement, civil disobedience movement, Quit India movement, as well as other important decisions taken. So this phase is known as the Gandhian phase. So as far as this first phase is concerned, that is the moderate phase from 1885 to 1905, this phase was of the assertive phase, moderate phase. So as far as the members of this groups are concerned, the member of this group belong to the educated middle class consisting of professionals. You know that some of the middle class, educated middle class, who studied in foreign countries, in Britain, they formed this Indian National Congress. So most of the members, they belong to this educated middle class, who were doctors, lawyers, professors, and other educated class. So many of them were educated in England and had unlimited faith in British sense of justice. They believed that the British rule is good for India. They knew that the development which British are doing are good for India. So they were influenced by Western thought, culture, their literature, their history, because they had studied in England, they had studied their philosophy, their literature, so they were very much influenced, and that is why they believed in unlimited sense of British justice, and they only wanted the constitutional reform within the British rule. It means they did not want that British leave India. They wanted that only some constitutional reforms to be taken within the framework of within the British rule. And they believed in loyalty to the British administration and considered their association with British as a boon. So they were loyal to the British. They believed their rule is good. It is a boon for India. India is going to develop in their control, in their guidance. So they did not want freedom from them, but they want only some changes, some constitutional changes. That is why they followed very moderate approach, and this approach was of quite moderate nature, like prayer, petition, resolution. These all methods they followed. As far as the nationalists, early nationalists are concerned, these were educated middle class young Indians. So who were these prominent early nationalists? So you see that W.C. Banerjee, Surendranath Banerjee, Rash Bihari Bose, R.C. Dutt, these were some of the important leaders from Bengal. Then Dadabhai Nauroji, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Firoz Shah Mehta, Justice Ranade, these all leaders, they were from Maharashtra and Gujarat. While P.R. Naidu, Subramania Iyer, Anand Charlu, they were from Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. Pandit Madan Mohan Malvi from Uttar Pradesh, as well as this Indian National Congress did not include only the Indian, but some liberal Englishmen were also part of Indian National Congress, like A. Hume and Wedderburn. So these were some of the early nationalists who belonged to different part of India, from Bengal, from Maharashtra, from Gujarat, from Andhra Pradesh, from Uttar Pradesh, from all part of India. They were the prominent leader of Indian National Congress. As far as the demands of the moderate, what were their main demands? As we discussed, that they did not want total change, they did not want the ouster of the British, they only wanted some reform. So we can divide their reforms, their demands, into different categories. The first category was of constitutional reforms. So the British, they had adopted various changes. The changes which Indian want, these were constitutional reform. Under this constitutional reform, first of all, they wanted abolition of the Indian Council. Okay, so they want the evolution of the Indian Council, as well as they wanted the expansion of legislative council and legislative bodies. And in this expansion, they want that there should be the more representation of Indians in this legislative council and legislative bodies. As well as their demand was colonial form of self-government or Swaraj. They wanted that, just like that they have followed in Australia and Canada, where they have given Swaraj to the people over there, and overall control is of British. So the same type of Swaraj they want, colonial form of self-government or Swaraj they wanted that more powers to be given to rule themselves, although they want under the British rule. As well as more representation of the Indians in the Viceroy's Executive Council and other departments. So they were not only concerned that Indians should be given more representation in each and every department, as well as Viceroy's Executive Council. Here all these type of constitutional reforms should be made. Second category of their demand was economic reforms. So they not only wanted constitutional reforms, but they wanted some economic reforms also. Under these economic reforms, they wanted that reduction in land revenue and protection of peasants from zamindars. You know that during that time, land revenue was in excess, and these zamindars, they were using all possible means to harass the farmers, and the taxation was too harsh. if they failed to pay the taxes, they were beaten very badly, their properties were confiscated, they were treated very badly. So Indian moderates, they demanded that there should be the reduction in land revenue. It should not be that much high, because zamindar were charging very high taxes from the farmers, as well as they wanted their protection from zamindar, the harsh treatment which farmers were getting from them. So they wanted protection of them, as well as they wanted cheap credit to the peasants. You know that these farmers, for paying the taxes or for their some extra expenses, they were borrowing money from the money lenders, and the interest rate from the money lenders was too high. That is why throughout their life they were in debt and could not pay. So their demand was that if through British the farmers could get cheap credit at lower interest rate. Then they want rapid development of modern industries. As more industries will be established, Indians, they will get employment, their economic condition will improve. So that is why their demand was that British should do rapid development of modern industries, as well as they wanted in the change in the existing pattern of taxation and expenditure. The existing pattern of taxation, either it was zamindari system, mahalwari system, or yotwari system, each of these system was very harsh and very exploitative in nature. That is why Indian wanted that this taxation should be made easier. It should be changed. Present system is not good for the farmers, as well as there should be the change in the existing expenditure system. In this expenditure system was also faulty, which was not favorable for the Indians. So this expenditure, they wanted that British should not do extravagant expenditure on army, as well as saved money to be used on social services like health, education, etc. So they wanted that whatever money is saved, it should be spent on health of the people. People were suffering a lot. Health was totally negligible, as well as education system was also not that much advanced. So they wanted that education should be modernized and more money should be spent on education, as well as stopping of economic drain of India. This was the major issue. Economic drain, money from India was drained to Britain. This matter especially was raised by Dadabhai Nauroji in his book Poverty and Un-British Rule in India, in which he explained that how Indian money was drained to British in the form of salaries, in the form of savings, in the form of pension. In every form, the money was drained, Indian money was drained to Britain, and the money which is belong to Indian is not spent here, but it is sent to Britain, and their economy is getting advanced, and we are getting backward day by day. So their demand was that the economic drain should be stopped. Then third sort of demand of these moderate was administrative reform. These moderates, they wanted appointment of educated Indian on higher posts. You know that during that time the higher posts were reserved only for the British. Indians were given only the small paid jobs of clerks, peons, or some other low paid jobs, while the higher paid jobs and higher posts, these were all reserved for the British, where they were paid higher salaries, and that higher salary was sent to Britain. So the demands of the moderate was that more Indians should be appointed on higher posts. As well as one of the other important demand of these moderates was that the civil service examination should be held in simultaneously in India and England. You see that during that time civil service examination used to be held in England only. If any Indian aspirant want to appear in that test, he has to go to England to appear in that test, and these Indians, they were not mm, rich enough to bear all the expense to go to England and appear in that test. That is why they could not get these civil services posts. So these all were given to the British only because Indians were deprived of appearing in the test. So their demand was that if it will be conducted in India, then Indian will also be selected and they will be the part of prestigious civil services. So their demand was that this exam should held simultaneously in India and England. Then the moderates wanted the repeal of Arms Act, License Act, and separation of judiciary from executive. You see that during that time they had passed various acts like Arms Act, Indian could not keep the arm. License Act, every time they have to carry the license for their arms and other things. As well as they wanted that judiciary should be separated from executive. Judiciary should be independent because executives, they are all these viceroy and other British officers, British councils, executive member, they were influencing judiciary, and Indians were not getting equal treatment as of the British. So their demand was that judiciary should be separated from executive. As well as they wanted an increase in the powers of the local bodies. Local bodies were there, but they were having very negligible power. That power which was beyond their satisfaction, very less power given to the local bodies. So their demand was that more power should be given to the local bodies so that they get some governing experience and they control their resources. Then next one was spread of primary, higher and technical education. As we see that this technical education as well as primary and higher education was not that much advanced. So it was the need of the time that British should spread education at the primary level, higher level, as well as provide technical education so that Indians could get job, because there was good demand of the educated Indians. If good number of schools should be opened, if technical education is given, then they can earn their livelihood and can improve their economy. Next one was reform in the police system to make it more efficient. Police system was very backward. They were Indians. They were not treated as equal to the British. These policemen, they were totally dependent on British and having no power at all. They were totally controlled by them. Lot of corruption was there. So in that way, they want reform in the police system where more power in the police to the Indians. Then next demand was defense of civil rights. These moderates, they oppose restriction imposed by the government on the freedom of speech and expression and press. So they defense of civil rights, they wanted more rights to the Indians. They wanted that there should be the freedom of speech and expression. You know that the moment any Indian criticized British government or spoken anything against the government, they were immediately arrested. Press was also not free at all. They have to take permission before publishing any article in their newspaper. So Indians wanted that these public should have freedom of speech and expression, as well as press should be free. Next of their demand was abolition of the preventive detention and restoration of individual liberties. Many a time British thought that they might do some problem to them, and to avoid this, what they were doing? They were doing the preventive detention, detenting the people just for a preventive measure, just keeping in mind that they might create problem, and that is why they detented them. So Indian wanted that this should be stopped without any reason. People should not be detented, they should not be arrested, as well as they wanted restoration of individual liberties. Indians should be given more freedom, more freedom to the people, so that they can enjoy their civil liberties. Next of their demand was demanded rights to assemble and form association. For if you want to assemble at any place, then you will not get permission at all. They were not allowed to form their associations. So Indian demanded that different associations who could work for the betterment of the Indian, so they should be allowed to form the associations. So these were some of the important demands of the early nationalists. Next comes the beliefs of the early nationalists. What were their beliefs? What do they think about the British? So the early nationalists, they believed in constitutional and peaceful means. They did not believe in any radical approach. They believed only in the constitutional methods and peaceful method. They just wanted that the British, they should take some steps to accept our demand in a peaceful way, as well as they believed in British fair play and justice. Their belief was that British rule is good, they will do justice with us, they will listen to our genuine problem, they will try to find out the solution of these problems, and British rule, they will continue to work in the direction of the betterment of the Indians. So they look to England for inspiration and guidance. For each and everything, they thought that British inspiration and guidance is required for the development of India and the advancement of the Indians. So for each and everything, they look for the inspiration and guidance from England. They wanted to maintain a certain dignity and moderation even when criticizing the British government. So they did not follow any harsh approach to criticize British government. Whatever they were doing in a very moderate way, in a very decent way. They were taking very soft approach, and even when they were criticizing in a very decent way, telling them that this is the problem, you should consider it, take a step to resolve this, try to understand these are our grievances. So they were maintaining certain dignity while they were criticizing the British. They recognized the benefits of English rule, like English education and the modern means of communication. These moderates who were British educated in England and all, so they recognized that English education is very much beneficial for them. After only taking English education, they have come so far, they have become leader of the nation, and in the same way, this modern means of communication, they have developed railway system, so it had spread in most part of India. So it has connected most part of India, and this communication is good for development of the nation. So that is why they recognize their benefits, that in British had spread English education. It is giving a chance to become advanced and to get good jobs, as well as this communication system, transportation system using telegraph and telephone. These all are way of development which are going to make India a progressive country. Next comes methods of struggle of the early nationalists. So what were the methods they followed? They did not believe in agitation, confrontation and unconstitutional means. No agitation is required, no confrontation, no unconstitutional means. Protest only through peaceful means, only through prayer, petition and resolution, only through constitutional ways, just telling their problems, looking forward for this solution of their problems. So they believed in orderly progress through constitutional means only, in a proper way, through proper channel, through proper method, means they want in an orderly way and following constitutional means. So they carried agitation through, they gave the petition to high government officials. They gave them form of petition that we want this. So all the high government officials related to that department, they gave them the petition, told their problems, told their demands. They send the resolution, they pass the resolution in their meeting. This is our demand, and they handed over to the British officials. They organized meetings, and in these meetings they discuss the problems which people are facing. For this, to bring the people problems, they also distributed some leaflets and pamphlets at different places, so that British should become aware about their issues. Preparing and sending over the memorandum. They prepared certain memorandum, they gave it to the British here, as well as they sent these memorandums to England also. So they sent their delegation of politicians to England. So many of the moderate leaders, they went to England with their delegation, with their demand, and they handed over these demands to British. As well as they set up a British Committee of the Indian National Congress in London in 1889. So those who were the sympathizer of Indian, of British community, so they set up a British committee with them. They set up this committee in London in 1889, and the main work of this was, it published a weekly journal also, India, to present Indian people grievances and plight. So this committee also took the cause, as well as through their journal, its name was India, to they start publishing through this magazine, weekly journal. They put the grievances of the Indians in that magazine and tried to convey this message to the British, that they look into these issues and try to resolve these all issues. So question arises that through these methods, how far they were successful. So what were the achievements of the moderate? Did British were bothering at all? Were they convinced with these methods? So as far as these achievements of the moderates are concerned, first, that developed national unity, consciousness and awakeness among the Indian masses. Indian National Congress, they worked with the common people and they called different meetings, they distributed leaflets and pamphlets, they published articles in the newspapers. So through this now they succeeded in developing the national unity among the masses, as well as they made people conscious. They made people aware about the problems the masses are facing. So it brought the consciousness and awakening among the Indian masses. So it can be considered one of the important achievement of the early nationalists, that they could unite the Indians, they could make them aware about their problem, because till now they were not knowing what is happening, what the issues are there. At the local level they were having problem, but now this all these problems were discussed at the in different meetings, and people were unite now, and they knew their it brought the awakening among them. Second of their achievement was that they popularized the idea of democracy, civil liberty, secularism, nationalism and representative institution. So it was one of the important achievement that they wanted to participate in self-government. So they popularized the idea of democracy, as well as they worked for the freedom of the Indians. So they worked in the direction of civil liberties. They wanted that there should be the respect of all religion, and all religious people should be allowed to worship and do their prayer according to their way. So they developed secularism, nationalism as well as representative institution. One of other their achievement was that they exposed the true nature of British rule by explaining how British were exploiting Indians. Okay. So through drain theory and through other publication in different magazines, they exposed that how British were exploiting the Indians. These moderates, they supported social reforms and raised voice against child marriage, as well as they supported the age of consent bill. So they were not only working in the direction of demanding various things from the British, but they also work in the direction of social reforms. They also try to awaken the Indians that what problems are there in their society. So they wanted to remove these social evils. So for this they work in the direction of raising their voice against child marriage. And when the British passed the bill, age of consent bill, they raised the age of British raised the age of marriage, so they supported it. Then they pressurized the British to reform legislative council, and it resulted in the passing of India Council of Act of 1892. So Indians moderates, they were continuously demanded that the legislative council should be expanded and representation of Indians should be there. So finally, because of the pressure from the moderates, the British passed Indian Council Act of 1892. So it was one of the achievement of the moderates. As well as their effort led to the appointment of Public Service Commission of 1886, Welby Commission on Indian Expenditure 1895, etc. So these were some of the reforms made by the British, and for all these reforms the effort of the moderates were praiseworthy. Because of their effort only, British were compelled to make some changes in the Indian governance. Next comes with whatever their achievements were there, but their achievements were question marked by certain of their failures also, because British, they were not ready to bother much about the demands of the British, of the Indians. They accepted only few of the very basic demands. Most of the time, this delegations and the meetings of these early nationalists, they were meeting every time during the break of Christmas at the end of December. So in this meeting, they were discussing lot many things. They were handing over their demands to the British, but most of the time these were not accepted. So very limited success rate was there. So what were the failures of the moderates? First, it was the moderates, they have very limited area of influence and no mass following. Their influence was confined only to the educated middle class, while the 70-80% population, they were uneducated Indians. They were not knowing what their activities are, what their demands are, what is Indian National Congress, who are the leader. General people, they were not having any interest in their activities. They were not knowing anything at all. So there was no mass following of Indian National Congress. Only they have influence to the educated middle class only of these professionals. They were only knowing that what Indian National Congress is doing. General masses were totally unaware about their plan, about their activities, about their demands. So their area of influence was very limited. Next one was inadequate methods of prayer, petition and resolution. As we discussed that they followed these methods in a very moderate way, following constitutional means, very peaceful means. So these methods were considered as inadequate because most of the demands were remain as it is, and British did not bother to think about these demands. So these methods which moderate followed were considered as inadequate one, because this method did not bring any fruitful result. This method did not bring any desired result. Then they failed to see that the British interest clashed with the Indian interest. These moderates, they were thinking that sooner or later they will accept our demand, but they failed to understand that British interest is to extract as much resources, as much money from India for their country, because their main purpose was imperialism. Their main purpose was colonialism, to take money from here to make their economy stronger. And Indian moderate, they were just thinking that this is not so, and they will accept our demand, but they fail to interest that there is a clash of interest. Their interest is to extract money, not to spend this money on development of the Indian. They were hardly bothering about the welfare of the Indian, well-being of the masses, and did not bother to solve their issues. So these were some of their failures which were criticized. Moderates were criticized by the nationalists and by the assertive nationalists for following these methods of prayer and petition. So it is all about these moderates. Thank you very much. Hope you like this video. Thank you.